everybody, welcome to the Evening Reader. My name is Priscilla. I am here today on this nice Friday, this lovely Friday. I hope it's lovely where you are, to share some picks, possible picks for Nonfiction November. I've got 4 memoirs. 3 of them were published in the last couple of months, and one was published back, I think, in 2021. But still worth reading, something that I read for Shorty September. So I thought that, yeah, I would, if you're curious, if you like to read memoirs or you've been looking at some of these titles, maybe this will, push you in the direction, push you in the direction of reading them. I didn't mean to, I'm not trying to person handle you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Okay, well, this is only the 5th time that I've started this video, so I think just for the sake of time, we're just going to move on. All right. So, 2 of these I read for Nonfiction November, and I would like to be doing deeper reviews of these, but I'm not going to because I just have not had the time to pull that together. So with that caveat, the first one is Stay True by Hua Hsu. And this was really wonderful. I found out about this through, I believe it's Danielle at Brown Girl Reading, because she had talked about this as a book, that this was a possible book club pick for her. And just hearing her, talk about it a little bit, I ended up doing this where I looked it up. I was going to put it on my TBR and it was already on my TBR, which that happens a lot. But the TBR discussion is, well, that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, so I picked this up for Shorty September. It was a short, quick read and really loved this book. This is Hua Hsu. He's like a long-form journalist. This was his first book. And he grew up in California. He is the son of 2 Taiwanese parents. They came to the United States in the 1960s. And his father in particular had left Taiwan because he was really getting into political activism and kind of getting, I guess, into a bit of hot water, making a not good name for himself. And both of his parents came to the United States to study. They came separately. They met here in the U.S. and got married, and they had Hua, and they lived in Northern California, where he grew up. And he ended up going to Berkeley. He talks a lot about what kind of kid he was. This was the early 1990s when he was a teenager, and he got very into alternative rock. He really loved Nirvana, and he really loved, going to thrift stores and, just doing the whole scene. He just really loved anything alternative. He loved to find things that were really off the beaten path. And this is important because when he starts college, he goes to Berkeley, and he meets a friend whose name is Ken. And Ken is very, very different from Hua. He is a Japanese American. He is from San Diego, has also grown up in the United States. His parents had emigrated from Japan, and he's very much he loves Pearl Jam. Hua hates Pearl Jam. If any of you were around in the early 90s, you maybe remember that was kind of a weird pseudo rivalry. The bands were friends, so they didn't have any kind of rivalry, but it was sort of like if you were more authentic if you liked Nirvana versus if you liked Pearl Jam, then you were kind of just kind of soft into it. And so they meet. Ken is also a fraternity brother. He's just a very sort of straight-laced guy. But somehow they find each other and they become friends, and they grow close through these discussions that they end up having. And they have these very deep discussions about life and about what it means to be Asian American. They have very different experiences of being Asian American. They have different ideas about how to, this is in the 90s at Berkeley, so there was a lot going on in terms of trying to like rework the canon, like the literary canon, to rework language, to become more aware, to become more politically correct. Um, and all of these things, and this was a time when a lot of different groups, like minority groups, were really stepping up, stepping into their own, starting clubs and movements and uh, educational, what's academic, like full academic programs. And it was really a terrific time. It was really a wonderful, it felt like it was going to be more revolutionary, I guess, than it really ended up being, given where we are now. But they become very close friends, and there are certain things that they do bond over. And it's only for a very short period of time that they are friends, because his friend Ken is tragically uh, murdered in a carjacking. And Hua has to sort of deal with this loss, and how much Ken has influenced his life, and what that loss means, and how it ends up meaning a great deal more than he even realized. It's just a wonderful meditation on friendship. It is a very fascinating look into, being not just an Asian American, because that's just like a big lump, right? In and of itself. And there are many different types of experiences, many different Asian peoples in the United States who are Americans, but they have very different experiences based on, their home life, and, different cultural traditions, but then they also have a very same experience of, for example, entering a classroom and suddenly you're no longer Japanese or Taiwanese or Chinese or Vietnamese, you're just Asian. Uh, but that's not to say this is not a book about identity in that sense. This is really a book more about friendship and about growing up, I would say, than anything. And one of the really touching things in this book is that Hua's father, when Hua is a teenager, his father goes back to Taiwan. He's able to move back to Taiwan because Taiwan has started to open up again, because the government has changed, and his father is able to go back and work. He's an engineer. He works for a semiconductor company, and he decides that that's just the best thing for him to do. And his mother stays with him until he starts college, and then she moves back to Taiwan, and they have their life in Taiwan, but they communicate by fax machine. And so Hua will do things like, he loves writing. He's not really good at math. He's not very stereotypical, but his father is an engineer. And of course, he wants his son to be diligent, and he wants him to be good at math, but he also very much encourages the other side of him and like his other interests. And it's very sweet, because he'll like, Hua would do this where he would send his math homework to his father and ask for help. And his father would solve the problems and like write little notes to him and then fax it back so he would have it in the morning. And it's so sweet. But then his father would also write notes to him, or fax him letters about his life. And he would always, be really trying to like connect with him about like the music that Hua loved, or about baseball, or about these different things. And he would always say, he'd say, "What do you think?" And like, for example, when Kurt Cobain tragically committed suicide in 1994, he wrote his son a letter about Kurt Cobain, and about, the difficulties of depression, and about having, trying to find where you belong, and trying to look for reasons to be happy. And it's so incredibly touching. It's so well written. As you can see, it won the Pulitzer Prize, so it must be well written. But this was just a really fantastic, lovely read. Just a wonderful coming of age story. So I highly recommend that one. The next one, so I have talked about this author before, although I haven't read anything by her, I think, since I started the channel, except that I think I reread one of her novels. So this is Miriam Toews, and this is A Truce That Is Not Peace. This is her memoir. And you could say it's a memoir slash book about writing. I'm going to give this a few caveats. One is to say that if you've read Miriam Toews, but for example, maybe you've only read Fight Night and or Women Talking, those are very different books than her first three books. Particularly Women Talking is not really like anything else that she's written because her other books are much more autobiographical in nature. But if you have read her early novels, A Complicated Kindness and All My Puny Sorrows, which is one of my favorite novels of all time, then you'll have a sense of a lot about her already and what kind of writer she is, the kind of humor that she brings to her writing, but also the sort of serious topics that she explores. I've also read her, I guess you would call it a memoir. It's nonfiction. It's a book that she wrote about her father. It's called Swing Low. And she writes it as though she is her father. She writes it in her father's voice, and it's his memoir. And if you have read All My Puny Sorrows, that's a highly autobiographical novel. So you will know, and this is not a spoiler, that I believe it was in 2009, her father committed suicide. And then again in, I think, 2012 or 2013, her sister committed suicide. I may have the dates. I think the dates may be a little off. I apologize if they are. So they both dealt with deep, deep, debilitating depression for both of them for much of their lives. And like All My Puny Sorrows is about the character in that book very much trying to prevent her sister, who's begging her to help her end her life. And the main character, the protagonist, is her name escapes me at the moment, is trying very hard to prevent her sister from doing that. And you'll find in this, I mean, if you've read interviews with Miriam Toews, then you already know that that's a highly autobiographical book. That same material that is in A Complicated Kindness and Swing Low and All My Puny Sorrows is in here. And while this does have Toews's signature sort of wry sense of humor, her kind of, I don't know, she's sort of off the cuff, a little bit absurdist. That she's quite funny. She can be laugh out loud funny, but this is a much more raw book than any of those books. Most certainly, this is a much more raw book than All My Puny Sorrows because it is real and it is true, and it's sort of her taking off the mask. And the frame of this book is that she's going to attend a writers' conference in Mexico City. And the Writers' Conference wants all of the participants in the conference to answer the question, why do I write? And so throughout this book, she keeps trying to answer the question, and she sends them the answers, and they say, no, this is not what we want. Please answer the question. And she keeps trying to answer the question until, finally they're like, no. Because it does come down to really that why she writes is to try to figure out why, to try to figure out her family, to try to figure out why her father felt the need to commit suicide, why her sister felt the need to commit suicide, and how do you continue on. And there's a lot about her mother in here. Her mother is, I think, just one of my heroes, one of my idols, this way that she has managed to just, she seems to have such a rootedness and a sort of pragmatic humor that's not cold-hearted, but just very much like we must go on and we must find things in life that are good. Sort of like Hua Hsu's father says, we must find these things and continue on. So this was a really, it's a it, it's a very well, it's just wonderfully written. It's beautifully written, but it's a difficult book. I would say it's very sad. It does have her trademark humor, but it's a much more raw book than the novels, or than the novel All My Puny Sorrows. And yeah, but if you like Miriam Toews, I wouldn't start here. If you and I'm not really selling her as an author by saying all this, but I do think All My Puny Sorrows is one of the best books, one of the best novels that I've ever read, just because she does such a wonderful job of walking that fine line between tragedy and comedy, if you will. And I wouldn't start with the memoir if you haven't read her fiction. I'd start with the fiction and then come to this, because I think that that's a better way into the story. So yes, I love this. The next book I don't have to hold up, so I'll have to put the cover up as picture. God, what words. I read this on a whim. I picked it up on a whim, and that is Joyride by Susan Orlean. This is Susan Orlean's memoir about her writing career, and it is absolutely just a complete joy to read. I loved it. I think it was one of those books I bought it on a whim. I did not even know that it was coming out. I saw like a short on Instagram, and I just thought, I want to read that. And so I bought it and I read it in October. It was published in October, and it walks through Susan Orlean. She tells, pretty much the story of how she became a writer. She's sort of a rare bird in that she decided early on that she wanted to be a writer. She didn't want to write, she knew she didn't want to write fiction, and she knew she didn't want to be a reporter, but she wanted to write long form journalism. She wanted to write long form nonfiction. That was the thing that interested her the most. Growing up when she did, the writers that were, popular or more prominent were people like Tom Wolfe or Joan Didion and Norman Mailer. These writers who were writing what they called the new journalism. And she was really just loved that, even though she also loved fiction. She shared with both of her parents, I think, but especially with her father, if I'm not mistaken, a love of reading, a great love of reading. And it's funny, they really wanted her to be a lawyer. They really hoped that she would grow up and go to law school, but they still supported her when she decided that she wanted to be a writer. She went to college. She studied English literature and minored in history. So she didn't go into journalism school, and her first love is really fiction, and she especially loves William Faulkner. But she just fell in love with language more than anything. She just loves what language can do, the rhythm, and just how you can use prose so wonderfully to tell different types of stories. And then she was also very curious just about the world. She really wanted to write about ordinary people. And so when she finished college, she moved with a boyfriend from where she went to college. I want to say she went to the University of Michigan. And I know I should know that, but hey, I don't memorize these books. She ends up moving to Portland, Oregon, and excuse me, she ends up going to work for a new alternative weekly magazine. And this is in the early 70s or early to mid 70s. And it's just kind of a scrappy outfit of people who they don't have any experience, but they've put this paper together, and they're really starting to make a go of it with this alternative weekly newspaper. And so she does that for a while, and then I believe the first thing that she does is, so she's in Oregon, and Bhagwan Rajneesh, I think it is, the Rajneesh Puram. If you've seen the documentary Wild Country on Netflix, the documentary series about this cult that moved into Oregon and took over this small town in Oregon, and they had a huge compound there, and they were very popular like in the late 70s and the early 1980s, and it was this sort of just, I don't know, just it was just this kind of a bizarre cult. And she'd been hearing a lot about it. Orlean had been hearing a lot about it. And so she'd gone to a writer's conference, and the editor of the Village Voice was there. And she just went to the Village Voice editor. She said, I have a story idea. I would like to talk with you. And she pitched the story idea. And she thought, I don't have anything to lose. And this was really pretty much, this became a kind of a standard practice for her of if something really interested her and she saw a way she could step into some other, like take a step up into a better writing position, then she would always just go ask. She just said, I don't have it anyway, so how can it hurt me to go ask for what I already don't have? If they say no, I'm just okay. I just stay where I am and figure out something else. And so they said yes, and it was like a huge story. And so she started to just, that obviously with that success, it brought her some momentum, and she ended up going to she did some writing for Rolling Stone. She did interviews. She did some music criticism, album reviews and whatnot. She didn't really like that. And she said, I'm too much of a music fan to want to write about music in that way. But she did like doing interviews, and she did go and tour and things like that. And then eventually she made her way into writing for the New Yorker, starting with writing Talk of the Town pieces. The first Talk of the Town piece that she wrote was on the retailer Benetton and how they fold their sweaters. And this piece got her her start in writing for Talk of the Town. And it's just, so she kind of gained some momentum at the New Yorker, and she eventually becomes a New Yorker writer with a contract at the magazine. And then that, one thing led to another. She, in the interim there, she wrote a book, her first book, which was about what people do on a Saturday night, and it's called Saturday Night. And she just kind of just keeps going. And, it's partially that she finds really interesting subjects. She knows how to write well. And I think that she writes about things that ended up, they end up capturing the imagination of regular Americans. And so she talks about writing her book, The Orchid Thief, and about the movie, The Orchid Thief, also coming out sort of around the same time, and what the experience of that was like, especially having a fictional character who is based on her, who does things in the movie that she just is like, I did not, and I would not. A very sort of bizarre experience. And then she talks about going on to write she writes a book about Rin Tin Tin, and then writing the book about the Los Angeles Public Library, her book, The Library Book, which I have read and I also highly recommend. It's absolutely fantastic. It is about the fire. It's one of the most devastating library fires in modern times that occurred at the Los Angeles Public Library at the main branch that is in downtown Los Angeles. I believe I want to say in the 80s. I think it was in the 1980s or maybe the early 1990s. I'll have to look. But it's such a joy of a book. And she does talk about her personal life. She talks about her marriages. She talks about having her son, and some of her personal struggles. But most of the book is about her experience as a writer and what kind of writer she is, her writing process. I'm making it sound more technical than it is. But really, I won't give it all away. I'm not going to tell you everything. I was about to say, there was another story that she talked about, but I'll just leave that there and maybe you'll decide to pick it up because it's one of those books that, everything about it is it's really lovely to read a book about a career and a person who they've done very well. They've grown in their career and it's mostly she's been doing what she wanted to do for her whole life. She's never done anything else. She's always been a writer and she has a wonderful writing voice and a terrific style and yeah, just thoroughly enjoyed it. So, final book I am reading right now, and you know that I'm going to recommend it, and I'll probably talk about it in some more depth. But that's Bread of Angels by this is the new book by Patti Smith. This came out on Tuesday, November 4th. I'm surprised I haven't finished it, but it's been a weird week. I'm a little more than halfway through, I guess, and I'm just loving it. I just think it's wonderful. This book, so Just Kids was about Patti and Robert Mapplethorpe. Patti, like I know her, about Patti Smith and her relationship with the artist Robert Mapplethorpe. Beautiful book, absolutely gorgeous. Her next work of prose was the book M Train. That has been my personal favorite, although I don't know. I love Just Kids, but I loved M Train because it is a book, it's more of a meditation. It's sort of a meditation on loss, but also on finding your place and on finding your home. In that book, she writes about losing her husband, Fred Sonic Smith, and also about losing her beloved brother, Todd, who died, like, I believe, maybe a week or so after her husband died, passed away very unexpectedly. And then sort of how she recovered and how she started to reestablish her place in the world, but then about sort of the devastation of Hurricane Sandy, but then still um, finding her home, her little house in Rockaway that she has, and just the comforts of a life and sort of finding a warm surrounding and also writing, always writing. She loves writing. It's her first love. And so she's really always talking about writing, and she talks about writing very much in this book and about becoming a writer and what stories mean to her. So this is gorgeous. This is actually the memoir of her childhood, of her life. So this is really a more traditional memoir of her childhood and her family and where I am now. She has just married Fred, and they've moved to their house outside of Detroit in St. Clair Shores, and her children, Jackson and Jesse, haven't been born yet. So just gorgeous. So that's it. I hope that you have enjoyed this. I hope that you have found something that interests you, whether that's for Nonfiction November or for December or the holidays or maybe sometime next year because we're coming up on 2026. It's time to start making those reading plans. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope that you have a good weekend. I hope that you've got something fun planned, or maybe you've just got something restful and cozy planned. And I hope to see you again really soon. And thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.